Minute is rated R. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is also rated R. We're going to spend this time discussing the movie in gory detail, and along the road we will talk about some adult content and use some of our favorite swear words.
Butthole Road, Cockshoot Close, Fanny Hands Lane.
Consider yourselves warned. Welcome to Rocky Horror Minute, the podcast where we break down the Rocky Horror Picture Show in excruciating detail, 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Leandra.
And I'm your other host, Kelly.
And joining us today for the first time, because this is the first time that we're recording this minute, is Jonfen Parker of The Bat Minute and Hedwig Inch by Angry Inch.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
We are so happy to have you.
Yay.
Absolutely.
I don't know why. I'm a nightmare.
No.
I've had worse.
I highly doubt that.
All right, Kelly, give us a good description of what happens in this wonderful minute.
All right, so today we're discussing minute 40 of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And this minute begins where we left off last minute with Frank saying success, because the previous line was, "Oh, I just love success." And then Riff Raff says, "He's a credit to your genius, master." Magenta says, "A triumph of your will." And then Columbia does not read the room at all and says, "He's okay," which sort of kills the energy. Frank screams, "Okay," and slaps the tank, kind of scaring everyone, and then leads Rocky over to Brad and Janet. Well, he says, "I think we can do a little better than that." And then leads Rocky over to Brad and Janet, and then says, "Now, Brad and Janet, what do you think of him?" And Janet lies through her teeth and says, "Well, I don't like men with too many muscles," which doesn't make Frank any happier. He says, "I didn't make him for you." That scares Brad and Janet. They go over to the other side of the room. And then he leads Rocky over to his birthday present, which is wrapped at the moment, and begins a song. And the first line is, "A weakling weighing 98 pounds. And that's the end of the minute.
No. It's pounds.
I can't do it as well as a Liverpudlian. It's Perns.
It's such a strange delivery, which I'm sure we're going to get to, but only Tim Curry can do it this well.
Mm-hmm.
You missed one of my favorite. You missed one of my favorite lines, Kelly.
Oh, I dropped a line. What was it?
He carries the Charles Atlas seal of approval.
Oh, yeah, Of course. That leads to one of my favorite stupid callbacks. I can't believe I missed that.
Now, the first note I had, because this whole scene is amazing, is like, I love that this tank is clearly, he's not pouring the liquid into it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's been made to look this way. But it's a very bad illusion, but in like a great way.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in previous minutes, but the tank was a reused prop from, was it Bride of Frankenstein?
Revenge of Frankenstein, and Bride of Frankenstein, and Frankenstein Goes to Jail, and Frankenstein Scared Straight.
The exact same
and Frankenstein Goes to Vegas. A tuna Frankenstein, yeah. Hell
yeah, I'm up for all of these movies. Come on.
Yeah, you didn't realize how deep it went, but it's almost like Batman. There are a lot of iterations. Some of them are canon, some of them are not, but all of them are wonderful.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm up for any Frankenstein movie. Even if I hear it's crap, I don't care. I'm watching it.
Yeah, I kind of like the crappy ones. Yeah. Of course, I like Rocky Horror, so perhaps I don't have the best taste.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody likes this movie, right?
Everybody I know. Or true. At least they're lying. They have the decency to.
I think maybe it's an English thing. I don't know. But pretty much everybody here likes it. I mentioned to someone at work that I was going to be on this podcast, and they were very excited. They're like, "Oh my God, I love that movie."
Yeah.
And this is a boring work person.
I only recently learned that some people regard this as like a so bad it's good movie.
Oh,
Like around the time I started doing Rocky Horror, which I think was in 2017, um, somebody was saying like, oh, was trying to describe it to somebody else when they found out I was doing the show, and they're like, oh yeah, it's one of these movies, and the movie is terrible, but it's so hilarious to laugh at it. And I was like, the movie's not, well, I wouldn't say it's terrible. Maybe you just didn't understand it was campy on purpose. I don't know.
yeah.
But I mean, like, now granted, there are, let's say, certain elements of filmmaking were foregone in favor of campiness or just plain old budget concerns. But it's, I genuinely thought that everybody loved this movie and thought it was a masterpiece of film until fairly recently.
That's crazy.
Masterpiece?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's a classic in its own right. So I thought
Yeah.
the exact same thing. Like at the moment, I'm all familiar with campy because on Batminute we're talking about Batman and
Yeah.
Robin, which is allegedly a camp classic, if you ask me. You know,
I've
not
never
everybody
seen it, but I've been
agrees.
meaning to watch it for a long time.
Oh,
Oh, I
you've
love
got
hating it.
It's wonderful. Like Poison Ivy is a drag queen in the best
Yes.
possible sense. In fact, I want Poison Ivy to come back into the movies and be played by Alaska Thunderfuck.
Oh my
Oh,
god,
yeah.
that would be so good.
Do it, do it, people.
You heard it here first. This is what we all want.
We do. And Alaska actually has dressed. I don't think they've played them, but they've dressed as Frank.
I think I saw that. I know that Trixie was on a Rocky cast for a little bit.
Oh,
Oh,
I
yeah.
see that.
Trixie Mattel, please come on our podcast. I know you're listening.
I've tried to get her on the Hedwig one, and she never replied.
Oh no, she's
too
leaving
much
us
of an
on red.
international superstar.
No,
Love
yeah,
her so
I'll
much.
cut her some slack. She never opened the message, so it's fine. Same with Jinx Monsoon. Never opened the message.
Oh.
Oh, Jinx would have been fun.
Yeah, well, she's played Hedwig, so I thought, oh, it's perfect. But you know, she probably gets 5 billion messages a minute.
Well, Trixie's about to be on tour in like Europe and England and stuff, so it's up to you.
So I can go to the show, shove a
Yeah.
dictaphone in her face, and get her thoughts. Okay.
Yeah.
I heard the first part of dictaphone and went, what?
Yeah. Yeah, just
So-
show the dictaphone.
Well, you know, she might appreciate that.
I mean, she's not Willem, so perhaps not.
But back in this as well, I had a question, right? Why does Columbia only think that he's okay? I mean, I agree personally, but I'm weird.
You're
Yeah,
not
no,
weird.
he's not my type either. I think I've discussed this in the past. He's like, for me, the male. Well, I guess Frank, if we're considering him a male, would be the pinnacle of male attractiveness in this movie. But Brad would come second. So yeah, but I think I always thought Columbia was like a little jealous. What do you think, Leandra?
I can see that. Yeah, jealous because it's yet another person who's stealing her Frankie time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in the commentary, which I've talked about several times, the Patricia Quinn and Richard O'Brien commentary, Patricia Quinn claims that particular line reading, like the tone of voice she used, was Patricia's idea, and she said, I gave Nellie a note and told her to say it like that, and it surprised everyone, and Tim Curry's reaction was genuine in that moment. I don't know if that's true, not to cast any aspersions on something Patricia Quinn said, but that's what she said in the commentary, was that originally Columbia was supposed to sound really enthusiastic and genuinely be like, yeah, he's okay, but then it's in the movie it's more of a he's okay kind of sound.
That's much funnier.
Yeah, it makes
sure.
sense too, because in the Rocky Horror Show, the stage directions kind of imply that Columbia should be going, he's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, this is supposed to be like oh, yeah, it's fine.
Well,
I like this.
I mean,
sure.
Frank's scripted reaction would make more sense if she was kind of dissing Rocky, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, I don't know. I don't know if it was ever necessarily intended to be like an enthusiastic praise of Rocky, at least.
Nobody uses the word okay as an enthusiastic word, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because he's created life, god damn it, and it's only okay. Oh, yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, right number of appendages, one would assume. Hair's a little bit dodgy, but, it's fine.
That hair. That hair.
Yeah, I know. We discussed that hair at length in a previous episode just because but we came to the conclusion that this was probably seen as an attractive hairstyle in the 70s.
God, it probably was.
Yeah, because of the Beatles and everything. I didn't think about it. I always thought that, without thinking about it, I honestly thought that he was supposed to look like a young boy in a sense, because that's what that hairstyle reads as to me now.
Yeah,
but
maybe that is what it is.
Fashionable.
Because he's just been born and he's kind of innocent in a way.
I mean, realistically, that's probably just the hairstyle Peter Hinwood was rocking at the time.
Rockying.
Yeah.
In the original stage production of the Rocky Horror Show, the person playing Rocky had long hair, and I thought that was very interesting. What was considered super hot and cool at the time was very kind of beefy, jacked men, and it was kind of hard for them to find that. And also have it be somebody who could sing and act and possibly dance and is fine with wearing fishnets and a corset. So it's just, at some point you have to sacrifice something.
Yeah. I get that. Like, it's there's not a lot of men like that who would even want to sing like in something like this.
Well, Peter Hinwood was one of them. That's not his voice.
No. It is not.
No. I didn't know that for years either. Like, I just assumed, like, oh, okay, his singing voice is really different to what I imagined, but that's fine.
He didn't even get to keep his grunts.
They probably thought
none of the audio.
They probably thought if any of his actual audio's in there, it's too jarring. It's going to sound too different when it like flips.
Yeah, I guess.
All I know is I'd be super embarrassed if I saw this and went, wow, none of my voice is actually in this. It's kind of like Singing in the Rain, only I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
Hey, it worked for Darth Vader. The actor, they cut all of his dialogue out without telling him.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and they just like replaced him with James Earl Jones.
I mean,
but being replaced by James Earl Jones,
exactly,
that's fine.
Well, I'd be fine with it, but apparently he was not happy, and he held that grudge until he died.
Having that happen after the fact, I can understand why that would be offensive. But yeah, that's right. James Earl Jones is such an incredible voice actor that it's like, how could you not choose that voice?
Especially because this guy was from, I can't remember exactly where in England, but it was like Cornwall or something, which is like, how do I put it politely without upsetting people? It's not a good accent. It's you sound like a farmer. So that's not Darth Vader. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You would expect, if he had an English accent, you'd expect it to be like a posh one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a weird country farmer. Yeah.
Although I guess, Anakin's roots, but of course none of that
kind of would make sense, actually. Yeah. And then Luke becomes a farmer. This is a Star Wars podcast now.
Yeah, I was about to say, has anyone done Star Wars Minute? That would be a really interesting podcast.
Maybe after we're done with Drag Minute.
Right. Well, we're getting into all of them on this episode.
Yeah, we'll catch them all.
Pokémon Minute.
Jesus Christ.
I Pikachu to get back on topic. So I really love kind of the domino effect of uh, what Nell says. She says he's okay, and then Frank immediately turns his head. It's just like very snappy. And then Riff, Magenta, who also just as a side note is super short comparatively, only visible from like the chin up because she's stretching. She doesn't even turn to face Columbia. She looks angry. She's just like seething. And I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it
So
is kind of like everybody is astonished that Columbia would have the balls to say that, which is fair because we've seen how Frank reacts to insubordination.
How he flips out at everything.
yeah, he doesn't chill.
Yeah.
No, well, that's the interesting thing about Frank. In fact, let me just say, I believe I said before that Columbia says he's okay. Slightly wrong there. Please ignore my mistake. But yeah, Frank, I find him a fascinating character because he's quite complicated for a movie like this. You would think
Mhm.
in a movie like this, just make him two-dimensional, make him silly, make him camp, done. But no, like he's a villain. Like he's a horrible individual.
Yeah.
But you love him at the same time. You're very conflicting sort of
Yeah.
feelings.
And he's got a tragic element to him, you know.
Hmm. Well, I
Especially,
get.
I mean, after I'm going home, that's where I think Frank's really big, like sympathy number. But
Yeah, because I get the impression maybe he. I'm just thinking outside of the box, really. That maybe he came to this planet and discovered all of these new wonderful things and reveled in it and loved it and like wanted to stay and enjoy. But that's not what they were there for. That's not what they do. I
Mhm.
think maybe back on their planet they don't even have genders. These are disguises entirely.
Mhm.
This is my headcanon.
Yeah, well, there's
I like
that
it.
play, right, Leandra?
The the sequel to Rocky Horror that doesn't exist but definitely exists
Right.
and
And
isn't
that
shock treatment.
Oh yeah.
It's Revenge of
that
the Queen.
yeah, that has descriptions or something, right, that implies that they are not humanoid or human looking on their
Aha, I'm on the
planet,
right
and
track
these are
then.
indeed, yeah,
Because that's what
disguises.
I've always thought is like on their planet, maybe they've only got one sex, and when they've
Mhm.
come to Earth, they've just adopted these disguises, and then Frank it's almost like he picked the wrong disguise in his mind. Like, oh no, I want to play with this a little bit more. I want to have more fun, and that does kind of make him tragic as well because he seems to just love Earth in a hedonistic
Yeah,
fashion, but he loves it.
yeah, I
He's
would agree with that.
liberated and free, and he's offering that to everybody. But in doing so as well, he goes too far, and he's a bit. How do I word this? Rapey?
Tyrannical.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He makes
definitely.
not great choices.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not
But
an
I think
excuse, but does he understand that? I don't know. We don't know anything about their race.
I would say even the people making this movie didn't fully understand some of the consent issues in the film at the time. Some of
Yeah.
them.
I think they probably
Um,
just thought this'll freak out the norms watching it.
right. I think that wasn't a conversation that was being had quite to this degree in 1975.
Hmm.
So because of that, some of the scenes are really uncomfortable from a modern point of view.
I think in a way though that adds to them. Maybe it wasn't what was intended, but it adds an extra layer to the characters and whatnot.
Mm.
well,
Because
that's what I was going to jump in and say. If Frank were just a very lighthearted, kind of foppish, flamboyant gay character, I don't think that Rocky would have had the staying power that it really does have. The fact that he's so many different things. And he's the villain, but it's a kind of a complicated character. I think that is part of what makes people go, okay, well, this isn't just one thing. This is
yeah,
something that even if he's doing terrible things, he's also very much owning his sexuality, and I can identify with that.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, because it is kind of, this isn't about the specific minute. I apologize. I've gone off down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But, you know, this whole movie, it's quite deep considering what it is, you know, because it's about sexuality, gender expression, consent, as we talk about. It's more than it appears on the surface, which I find fascinating the more you delve into it. Because the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, it was a fun, campy musical. It's like, oh, actually, there's a lot of depth here. And it's kind of similar
Yeah.
to Hedwig in that sense. You know,
I was just
Hedwig's
about
more
to say
about.
that.
Yeah, they're very similar, aren't they? Like Hedwig's more about actual gender identity, whereas I'd say Rocky's more about like liberation and gender expression. But those things go
Yeah.
hand in hand.
And I
Yeah,
don't know
that's-
that there would have been a Hedwig and the Angry Inch were it not for the movies that came before it. Rocky
God,
Horror, also The Man Who Fell to Earth. Just David Bowie being this gender bent alien was, I think, super important to kind of progressing things for cinema.
Yeah, that's actually a really good call. I'd never made that connection before. Rocky Horror and The Man Who Fell to Earth have a kind of connective tissue. And actually,
So-
another reason I thought Hedwig was similar is because they kind of, well, Frank, I think these days you'd describe him maybe as like a gender fluid pansexual alien, and
Yes.
Hedwig's kind of the same. Like they ultimately discover a kind of non-binary identity, and they are openly
Yeah.
bisexual because they do say, "I must find my other half," but is it a he or a she?
Yeah.
People always overlook that with Hedwig. They're open to anything, a bit like Frank. Like, okay, bring it on.
And when you said the thing about maybe the aliens in Rocky don't actually have more than one gender, I was thinking about the origin of love. So it all just kind of ties together in my brain in a very unkempt knot.
Yes, everything's connected. That's my hashtag over at Batminute.
Yeah, and I honestly the character of Hedwig, I think, is similar to Frank in that we don't have much information in the text about Hedwig's true gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know how they present, and obviously a lot of things they've gone through to be in that situation. But I've witnessed many spirited debates about Hedwig's gender, and the same is definitely true of Frankenfurter.
It's very similar because Hedwig, like, they didn't choose to be a woman,
right?
And arguably at the end, they're not casting it off, but they are reborn almost as a new entity, as a third, as non-binary.
Yeah, I mean, there's not any real way of knowing, but I think there's a decent argument to be made that Hedwig would never have become, would have never played with their gender identity if they hadn't been through that sort of traumatic experience that kind of forced them to live as a woman for a while. But which is not to say that by the end of the movie, clearly they're not identifying as a man. But would that have happened if not for the earlier events in their life? There's no evidence one way or the other, you know.
I like that because it makes it more interesting and open to interpretation and things like that.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. And Rocky's the same way. I mean, we don't have any real way of knowing whether Frank is just a really enthusiastic drag queen or, gender fluid in some way.
Yeah. And we don't know, like, as we said, on their planet, is he a male alien? Who knows?
Yeah.
Or as I like to call it, a malian.
Yay!
Yeah. So I didn't really have many other notes for the minute. I love the way that Janet kind of panders to Brad and even looks at him for approval when she's saying, that she doesn't like men with too many muscles, which is also kind of a backhanded jab at Brad, which is hilarious to me.
And it did catch me off guard a little bit the way Frank is into that. Because you don't expect someone like this to be into the big jock. It's quite interesting. You assume Frank's going to be into like the weirdo goth kid or something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. To me, I think we've maybe talked about this in the past, but Frank actually is for dressing as a woman and everything. Frank is pretty butch at several moments in the movie.
Yes.
So, and I think it's heavily implied, at least, that he's topping. So it's interesting.
I love that about him, the way he
Yeah.
plays with expectations there, because despite some affectations, he is quite masculine. He's a man. He's just dressing
Yeah, I
this
mean,
Absolutely.
way.
we saw him with that whipping riffraff and everything.
Yeah.
It, and I've said this perhaps too often, but because I experienced Rocky for the first time at a very young age, I don't think of any of this as being at all sexy, barely even sexual. I see somebody in a corset and I don't clock that as like lingerie in a sensual sort of way. I go like, wow, that's probably sweaty. So like all of this has made me completely ungender my thoughts on really all clothing, and
Yeah.
I've been like that pretty much my entire life.
I like
Yeah.
that. But I will argue that Tim Curry is sexy in this. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, I mean, yes, I'm not saying that he isn't. I'm saying that like I first experienced Rocky as like a toddler, and I'm not sure that I thought of anybody as sexy as a
I
toddler.
should hope not. Anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't a sexy little baby like some of us.
Some of us can't help it, sexy since birth, but
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that to kick in.
Yeah. But you do wear a diaper, so.
No, that's our friend Miguel. But
Anyway,
back to Rocky.
yeah.
One thing about Janet saying that I don't like men with too many muscles. Brad smirks and then clearly starts looking at Rocky's dick, whereas Rocky is looking directly at Janet's feet. And I don't understand what Rocky's getting out of this. I wonder
oh
if he's going, are her feet weird or are shoes a thing?
no, I think he's into feet.
Yeah. Although her feet, she's wearing shoes at that moment.
They
Some
are
people
ugly.
are into that too.
Yeah, maybe he's just like, wow, those shoes are terrible, because they really are.
And you know what? I'm not going to kink shame him. He can like whatever he likes. I don't get it personally, but you do your thing.
This is absolutely off topic and definitely going to stay in. But
Yeah.
there was a Tumblr a while ago, and I bet you can still find it, called something along the lines of "My dick looks great in these shoes,"
Oh
and
my
it's
God, please
just
tell me it's what it sounds like.
it is
Yeah.
exactly what it sounds like. If you look at that many dicks and shoes, it's like just looking at a giant toe in a pump, and it's awful. But
Oh,
there's so much of it.
that's absolute gold. I need to see it. Although you'll then get into a weird headspace where when you see a penis not in a shoe, it looks
Yeah.
odd.
Yeah, looks like a weird like ET toe.
It's like, could you please put a shoe on that, sir?
Oh, one other thing. Fran Follenweider up in the top, she's looking down at all this happening, and she's just stretching out her back by leaning forward onto the rail. And as a somewhat large woman, I've done that move many times, particularly if I'm wearing heels, just kind of trying to shift my weight in a way that looks casual. And I'd love her all the more for it.
Relatable moves. I like that. Well, in the crowd, actually, you must have talked about him already. Biggins.
Oh, yeah.
Do
we
you
have
know?
to bring up
Do you
the
know him
Batman
over
connection,
there?
right?
We don't know him over here, but we do
I
know
know
that he's a
of-
big deal over there.
Yeah, exactly. I know of him, but yeah, he's not like a household name here the way I take it he is in Britain.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I imagine young people now probably don't know him, but even my age, 35, I grew up knowing who he was. He was on TV. He's like a stage actor. Did theatre work. Did pantomimes, which are the most English thing in the world. And he did get in a lot of trouble, though, when he went on Big Brother.
Oh no, what did he do on Big Brother?
He was being both biphobic and a little bit anti-Semitic.
Oh
That's
God.
that's not very cash money of you, Christopher Biggins.
No. But,
Big
since I'm not an
Brother's
idiot,
huge.
I didn't watch Big Brother, so I can't talk too much about it. But I remember the news going around like, oh, no, he's in a lot of trouble.
Big Brother's huge there, though, isn't it?
Oh, God, yeah.
Like,
Not so much now,
like,
but it was.
well, yeah, I would say the last time I was probably for the last time in Britain in like the mid 2010s,
Mm.
and I was shocked at how like Big Brother was everywhere. Like
Yeah.
like Big Brother
In a
that's how
different
Big
way
Brother
than the
were on the
US.
headlines. Yeah, exactly. Like the happenings of Big Brother were the headlines of like every newspaper at the convenience
Yeah.
stores. It was crazy to me. I mean, like
It was.
we definitely love our reality TV over here, but I don't think there's any one show that would make headlines here.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, because it was everywhere here. I mean, I last watched it in 2001. I watched the second series, and that's the only one I've ever watched. But you could watch it 24 hours a day. There was a channel dedicated to it. So you could just
Oh,
watch
yeah.
them all day, every day.
Wow.
They were just sitting around, like, reading, and you could watch them. And it was
That
kind
is
of weirdly hypnotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something very strange about watching somebody else be bored.
Yeah. Oh, it's odd. It's odd. And but I mean, obviously, Biggins was on the celebrity version, which is a much shorter, sort of truncated version of the show.
That checks out.
And tying into other things we were talking about earlier, one of the winners of a relatively recent celebrity show was Courtney Act won Celebrity Big Brother. So drag
Oh,
queens
really?
again.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Good for her.
And
I knew that. We love Courtney Act.
and she
Yeah.
blatantly did a whole like bit when she came out, because people kept going, oh, she had a wardrobe malfunction. It's like, no, I know drag queens, this was deliberate. Like, basically her entire
that's
dress
my MO
came
as
off.
well.
Yeah. Her whole dress came off, so everybody had to see her naked, including tuck.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
she
like,
did that
yeah.
deliberately.
Yeah, I pull that all the time, and people are catching on that I'm just wearing tearaway garments.
It's genius.
I remember the first time you did floor show, and I was like, you should probably just keep your bra on because your picture just going to pop out. You're like, no, it's fine. And you were just running around trying to do the dance, holding your boobs because they were comically out of the corset.
It was.
And I was just like, go
Janet,
backstage.
and she starts off with like the boa covering her, and there's I could feel that I had maybe popped out of my corset. And I had practiced this at home, but at home I had way more time to lace it really tight than it's a really quick change during the show. So I could feel that I was pretty sure I had popped out of my corset, but I wasn't sure until the first time she spreads her arms wide and the whole crowd like went wild because both my tits were just out with no pasties. And I was like, oh, well, that answers that question. And then, yeah, I was literally like, trying to do the floor show with like my holding my boobs, and Leandra danced up next to me and it hissed tap out. So I ran backstage and fixed it.
This is exactly what I want if I'm going to a show like that. That's perfect.
Yeah, because
sadly,
that's the sort of thing that
did not get naked.
Yeah, like that's the sort of thing that doesn't bother me, but is against the rules of the theater. So.
Oh, I was talking to someone. I was on another show recently, and that came up. I was on another show. It was my show. I've just realized. It was on my Patreon show all about Rent. And I was talking to my guest, Alison Grimm, and that came up in conversation. I didn't realize in America, you've got to be very careful about being naked on stage.
Yeah.
Or at least where she is.
Well, I think that...
Go
ahead, Leandra. You would know more about this.
So in Washington, D.C., this is considered a gender equal city in so much as it is not illegal for women to wander around topless.
Oh.
And because of that, it is not technically against the rules for people to perform topless. However, it is, even though I hang around almost exclusively very liberal people, there are substantially more conservative people in this area, perhaps because of the government or military, what have you. And anytime somebody does wander around topless, it causes a huge stir. So it doesn't happen terribly frequently.
That's the thing with America. I know nothing I'm told is ever a blanket because you have so many different rules in different places. Because I know here you can just do what you want, pretty much. With it, well, as in a show you can't walk around like that. But like I regularly go to a show where there's a poet who just performs his poetry completely naked. He's just dick out.
Yeah, I'm not. I just it wouldn't be probably worth it to the theater to allow us to do it, but I obviously take a more laissez-faire view of nudity than most people, so.
Plus, if it's an accident, wink, wink, there's nothing they can do. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I took all precautions.
Except I've known the manager, our point of contact at the theater, for a million years, and I don't think that he would believe me if I said, yeah, whoops, this happened multiple times.
Hey, he's got to prove otherwise.
Where Frank has now led Rocky to with the weights, it's on the other side of the elevator where I'm not sure anyone else could see it. So the Transylvanians are able to see above stuff, but there's still an elevator shaft directly in front of them, and Brad and Janet, I guess, might be able to see more. But as far as people who have a very reasonable chance of seeing most of this, it's really Christopher Biggins and Imogen Clare are possibly the only two who can see what's going on. And I'd like to think that that's why you don't hear much in the way of reactions.
That's a strange choice, though, isn't it? Why would you do that?
And one of the continuity things in this scene, something that I love, and it frustrates me to no end now that I've noticed it, is Frank throws the red drape off of the weights and just puts them on the ramp. And then it stays there in a clump for the rest of the scene until somebody has to run up the ramp, and then it's gone. So I love that.
That's great. That's great, because they clearly were planning, right, run up the ramp now. Oh, wait, no, crap, we need to move this. It's a hazard.
Yeah, it's that continuity. Sue Mary is just, she's so good at her job. She's definitely not a potted plant. So I think that that's really all of my specific notes for this minute. Does anybody have anything else before we jump into callbacks?
No.
I mean, I've just got some generic notes about the movie overall. I can save them for another bit. Or I just
yours good.
It's not my favorite musical, sorry, but I do love it. Because it did so much for queer representation and whatnot, even if Frank is an arsehole, like we talked about. And I imagine that this is the first time a lot of people saw a man dressed the way that Tim Curry is. Certainly for me it was. This and British comedians like we had Julian Clary and Eddie Izzard, who you probably know over there. That was all that trio is like my introduction to this. Like, oh, okay, you can play with gender. Like, what's going on? This is strange and exciting. It felt. I don't know. Yeah, those comedians specifically, because they were on TV all the time and they were acceptable to your parents because they were doing comedy. It still felt a little bit naughty though. Like, oh, I don't think I'm supposed to be watching this. And Frank was the same. Like, there's a little bit of danger there, and it was very exciting. And I imagine a lot of people probably found it that way, especially when it came out. Because what else would you have had? David Bowie? That's about it.
Yeah. It's so weird talking with my dad about Rocky now, because he was obsessed with Rocky when it was still hugely popular in the 80s,
Mm.
and we get into these conversations about how it's changed and the different ways that culture has kind of changed around it. And the first time that he had even heard of Rocky was he was walking down a street, and somebody dressed as Brad and somebody dressed as Janet had signs that said Tim Curry is God.
I mean,
And
it's
he was
true.
like, I need to find out. What does that mean?
That
And he
is
was
a
hooked.
that is an enticing advertisement, isn't it? Like, well, now I need to see it.
Yeah.
And he proves that he is God with the greatest line delivery in the history of cinema: vulnerable. I love
Oh
it.
my God, absolutely. There's so many words they says that are just they're stuck in my head for the rest of my life, and in
Oh,
a
yeah.
very good way.
Yeah, like I pick up all of his little mannerisms because this is not the way anybody speaks. This isn't an English thing.
No. I would be shocked if other people have three syllables in the word pounds.
I can't even do a good impersonation of it. It's like pounds. I love it. It's so good. Everything about the character's great. Like the only
Yeah.
thing that I get confused about though with the movie is like what is the actual story? Like what happens? Are we supposed to be kind of
So
left in the dark a little bit because they're aliens? Like we don't really know what's gone on at the end.
what I tell people when they're like, "I've never heard of Rocky. What is this about?" I say it's the gay musical parody of Frankenstein's monster with aliens. And there, if they ask me to give more of a synopsis, I go, "No,
Yeah,
just watch it."
you can't do any more of a synopsis, and if you tried, you'd make it sound worse than it is.
Yeah, like the more info I give, the less likely that this person's going to want
Mhm.
to find out more. So just I keep it as a small little nugget of information, and like watch it, you'll like it, trust me. And if you don't, just lose my number.
No, I like that because if you try to explain like Frank, like what would you say? He's kind of like he's got sort of Dracula-like hypnotic powers, seemingly, because he doesn't really persuade people into sleeping with him. He just sort of seems to be like he can seduce them with a look.
Yeah, I mean, Frank could suggest any number of things, and I go, I mean, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
I could. Oh yeah, you want me to just like wake up in the middle of the night and have dinner? That's good. I'm into it. Sure.
I mean, I wouldn't argue with Tim Curry. The only thing I do argue with in general is I think you're on my wavelength with this. Almost every song on the soundtrack is better than Time Warp, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank God.
It's not one of my favorites. It's great, but yeah, I understand also why it's the big hit that people remember because people love dance instructions and things like that. But
Oh yeah. Well, here it was a huge song. Like I knew the song before I knew Rocky Horror. It
yeah,
was always played. People would always play it at like a wedding or a school disco. These kind of situations where you had to play something that's. This is hilarious thing to say about anything Rocky Horror. Play something that's somewhat wholesome. Time Warp. Yes.
yeah,
People can dance to it. It's a party song. It's great.
It's that and the chicken dance.
Yeah, that would always come on as well in those situations. Yep, both of them. And it's weird to think of it because it's in Rocky Horror, a subversive queer piece of art.
Yeah, and you take it out of context and it's very tame, but
Mhm.
within its context, there's a lot going on with it. And honestly, if you're listening to the lyrics and you're listening through the steps of it, doing pelvic thrusts at people
Yeah,
is is not the sort of conservative family friendly thing that I think that people think of, but yet
yeah,
we've had multiple guests on that say, "Oh yeah, we did this in like our middle school dances."
yeah. Well, the first time I saw Rocky Horror live, I'd seen the movie. It was my I'm going to translate for Americans. My high school did a production of it, and it was weird watching it with your teachers and things. And like Frank was played by, I guess, the English equivalent of the jock. Like he was the captain of the rugby team, you know. But it was great. It worked somehow. I don't know. It was an odd combination of things, but he played it perfectly. You'd think he'd be Rocky. No.
And I think that's interesting because when Tim Curry was first approached to be in the Rocky Horror Show, it was because they were wandering around to different gyms in the area trying to find a Rocky.
Oh.
And of course Tim Curry is not a beefcake. He's particularly back then very, very lithe, almost waifish, but in a very toned sort of yoga body sort of way.
He's in good shape. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So at first they're like, "Ooh, would you like to be Rocky?" No, you're clearly Frank. Clearly you're Frank.
And magic was made that day.
Absolutely.
And my only other thing about the whole movie in general, I don't want to make you go down a whole rabbit hole of talking about the whole movie, but for me, if I'm picking my favorites, it's I'm Going Home and Superheroes. They're my duo.
No, those are definitely in the top for me. Every time we finish a song, Kelly goes, "Well, where does this rank?" And I go, "I don't know." They're all tied for best and worst.
Yeah, it's hard to rank these things. People ask me that with Hedwig, and it's like, have I got to choose, really? I consider it all one big song.
Yeah.
That's the best way of looking at it. But if I'm forced, they're my duo because, I don't know, it's just so emotional. I love the second half of the movie the most in general. Like, everyone seems to like the first half. I'm all about the second half of the film where it descends into madness.
My first favorite song from Hedwig was "Wicked Little Town" because obviously that was just kind of the I think the most accessible. Was the first one that I heard without watching the movie.
Oh, okay.
And then as I watched it, I had a favorite every time a song came up. I walked down the aisle at my wedding to "Origin of Love."
That's amazing. I'm jealous.
Yeah, and I got super weepy at it because I was like, "Oh my god, this is so good."
Well, I would have stolen that idea, but I am now single, so that's not happening anytime soon.
So, listeners, write in if you would like a date with John.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm willing to give it a go at this point. all genders, whatever, write in. I'm trying to think if I had any other.
Yeah, are we good to go into callbacks, guys?
Yeah, let's jump on in. Kelly, what you got?
The first word of this minute is success, after him saying, "Oh, I just love success." And the callback to that is, "You love anything that sucks." Right after Columbia pisses Frank off, and before he slams his hands down and makes her jump up off the tank, she's leaning on it. People will say either "get your tits off my tank" or "it's the itty bitty titty ejector," right before he slams and she jumps up. When Frank asks Janet what she thinks of Rocky, the typical callback is "lie through your teeth, slut." And then she says, "I don't like men with too many muscles." And then the callback is "just one big one," and Brad's looking right at it because, as Leandra mentioned, Brad is even adjusting his glasses and looking directly at Rocky's cock. And then the Charles Atlas seal of approval. I hinted earlier that there's a callback for that. It is to make seal noises and clap like "ork, ork, ork, ork." And then right before a weakling weighing 98 pounds, you can say "describe Brad" or describe insert any weak man that it's funny to make fun of right now. Like Jeff Sessions was big for a while, but now he is fortunately just a gleam in our rearview mirror, so that one probably wouldn't be relevant anymore.
I remember when Justin Bieber was the funny one.
Oh,
whoa.
Yeah.
Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Like, no. Now he's
I still think he's like 14, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No.
And before that, it was describe the Hanson girls because, it was the 90s and,
Yeah.
It's fun to say stuff like that.
Do you have any other comments, Sandra?
Yeah. So this is kind of at the end of the last minute and the beginning of this one. It's the, oh, I just love success. You can say, oh, I just love some sex. And then Riff Raff says he's a credit to your genius. You can say he's a credit to your penis.
Oh, these are all brilliant.
And Magenta, when she says a triumph of your will before that, you can say, what's your favorite German movie? Which doesn't quite go well, but if people know about the history of that, then it's like an
as an
sort of
amateur
thing.
historian, that's my favorite one. Not my favorite movie. Can I just say my favorite joke?
And for those of you who are like, what the fuck are they talking about? It's because there was a 1935 film called Triumph of the Will. And
the accent there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a Nazi propaganda movie, which, high humor.
Well, it ties into Rocky, though, because there's, certain questions to be asked of the good doctor. What's his background?
True. He's Dr. Von Scott.
Yeah, what are they trying to say there?
And then let me just take a look in a book. It's Reading Rainbow. It's crashed my list, but that's okay. So Columbia says he's okay. You can say he's not gay. And then Franco's not gay in response.
Like surprised, like what?
Yeah. What? I built him that way. So then when Frank says, Brad and Janet, what do you think of him? There's see slut lie, lie slut lie, which is I think better than the lie through your teeth.
Yeah.
And that's really all I have.
All right.
So if that is all we have, and we don't want to talk a little bit more about either drag queens or cooking or Pokemon, I guess we just wrap this up.
We can wrap it up. I had one thing I forgot to say. Just one thing.
Oh, go for it.
Because when we were talking about it being like Hedwig, I forgot to say, actually, there's one difference that I find interesting, because Hedwig's been reconceived for film, whereas Rocky, to me, despite being a movie, it feels like more like a filmed play to me. It feels like it's on the stage and there's just cameras pointing at them.
And I guess that makes sense because the Rocky Horror Show came first, and a lot of the people who were involved in that originally came right along for the movie, and I guess they weren't interested in messing with a good thing.
I think that both of them are great approaches, because Hedwig would be kind of hard to do as a movie if you're just translating the stage show straight up, because it's basically just Hedwig standing there telling you a story.
Yes.
That would be very boring. Yeah. Whereas this is perfect. Like, you don't need to change anything. It's already good to go. Just film the goddamn stage show and, like, mix it up a little bit maybe, but it's there. It's ready. Roll with it.
Yeah.
This adaptation for the screen is definitely better, at least in my opinion, than, for instance, Hamilton.
I love Hamilton, though, but I have nothing to compare it. I've never seen it live. Or who has? You can't get tickets still, because there's been a pandemic in the meantime.
Oh yeah, we're still going through that. How are you doing over there?
It's starting to improve a bit. I went out once a few weeks ago for the first time in a year and a half. I went to the pub. Oh my God, it was like the old times again, except you're not allowed to move.
I somewhat recently got my my second shot for the vaccine, and now I can go out amongst people, and it's so weird. And I'm running out of excuses to not do just that, because I don't particularly like people.
Well, you've still got to be safe, though.
That's true.
If this is staying in or not, I don't know if you want to date the show, but people, be safe still. It doesn't protect you 100%. I work for the National Health Service. I know this. Don't be screwing around.
And absolutely, I think that people are starting to think that it's over, so they can just go back to normal. And please don't.
Oh God.
Please, please not that.
At least we don't have too many of them. We just get the weirdos who think it's a hoax, like you get there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're not stuck in any geographical location.
Yeah, because of the internet. God damn it! It might bring you
damn
wonderful...
you, interwebs.
Yeah, it might bring you wonderful things like Rocky Horror Minute, but then it also brings you things like this.
All right, so let's go ahead and wrap this up the same way that we wrap up all of our episodes, with all of us trying to speak at the same time. With now. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
So get the fuck out.
Fuck out.